I'll tell you what, there's a special kind of silence that hangs in the woods after you've pushed yourself past the point of comfort. That day, I'd hiked 15 miles of rocky trail, the kind that never seems to level out, only climbs and drops in endless waves. The soles of my boots felt as if they'd been rubbed raw, and every step sent a dull ache crawling up my calves. The sun had been sharp and merciless at midday, beating down with a glare that made the stones shimmer. But by the time I dragged myself into camp, the light was fading to that soft amber glow that makes the pines look like they're made of bronze. I could barely muster the strength to unstrap my pack, but when I did, I sank down on a log and just sat there, breathing, listening. The forest had its evening voice on, chickadees tittering their last calls of the day, the whisper of a breeze working through dry needles, and somewhere far off, the faint trickle of a stream. My stomach growled like an angry animal. I'd eaten snacks on the trail, sure, dried fruit, jerky, a couple of crushed granola bars, but they hadn't lasted long. Now all I could think about was food, real food, the kind that comes hot, steaming, and salty enough to sting your lips. From the bottom of my pack, I pulled out a humble treasure, a crumpled packet of instant noodles. Nothing fancy, just the cheap kind you buy in a stack of 12. Some folks laugh when I say it, but I swear those noodles taste like a feast after a long day in the wilderness. I filled my little pot from my water bottle, balanced my stove on a flattish rock, and struck a match. The hiss of the flame catching was as comforting as a friend's voice after miles of silence. When the water began to boil, steam rising into the cooling air, I tore the packet open and shook those brittle coils of noodle into the pot. They softened almost instantly, curling and loosening like they'd been waiting their whole lives just for this moment. I sprinkled in the flavor packet, artificial beef though it never tasted much like beef to me, and stirred slowly, watching the broth turn a deep, savory brown. My mouth watered so hard I nearly burned my tongue trying to sneak a taste before it was ready. And that smell, heaven help me, it was the smell of victory. Salty, rich, just a hint of spice. It rose with the steam whispering in the cool breeze. I cupped the pot in my hands, feeling the warmth seep into my palms, and for a long moment I didn't even eat. I just sat there, staring into the steam, letting the ache of the day unwind from my shoulders. Finally, I lifted the pot to my lips and slurped that first mouthful. The broth was almost scalding, and it burned just enough to remind me I was alive. But the flavor, it was bliss. Simple, salty, greasy bliss. Every swallow seemed to fill not just my stomach, but my whole spirit. I could feel my strength seeping back into my bones, as if those noodles carried some secret magic known only to the weary traveler. I ate slowly at first, savoring each bite, but hunger is a greedy beast. Soon I was devouring it, broth dripping down my chin, spoon scraping the bottom of the pot for every last noodle. The sound of my slurping seemed almost loud in that quiet camp, but there was no one around to laugh at me, no one to say a word. Just me and the wilderness, and I was glad for it. When the pot was empty, I tipped it back and drank the last of the broth. It left a salty sting on my lips, and I licked them clean. For a minute, I sat back with a sigh so deep it seemed to come from my boots upward. The kind of sigh that only comes when you've earned your meal, when exhaustion and satisfaction collide. The forest, too, seemed to breathe with me. A barred owl called out somewhere in the distance, its voice soft and echoing through the trees. The crickets began their nighttime chorus, steady and reassuring, like the ticking of an old clock. The stars peeked through the canopy above, faint pinpricks at first, growing brighter as the sky deepened to indigo. It struck me then how such a small thing, a packet of noodles, a splash of hot water, could feel like a gift, not just to my body, but to my spirit. Back home, I'd pass by those little bricks of noodles without a second thought, maybe even wrinkle my nose at them. But here, after 15 miles of sweat, blisters, and grit, raccoon, deer, maybe a coyote? Once, long ago, I'd even startled a black bear nosing around my pack, and the memory still prickled the back of my neck. But on this night, as the hours stretched, the noises began to feel less like threats and more like companions. I tilted my head back, and through a break in the branches, the sky revealed itself in a way you only ever see away from towns and highways. Stars poured across it, countless and unblinking, stretching forever. I spotted Orion hanging just over the treetops, his belt a sharp line of light, and I let myself imagine he was keeping watch over me as I dozed there on the forest floor. A rustle in the underbrush snapped me back upright, my hand instinctively reaching for the flashlight clipped to my belt. My heart thudded as I listened, holding my breath, waiting. The sound came again, closer this time, and I could make out the soft patter of paws. I clicked the light on and swept it across the trees. 2 eyes glowed back at me, low to the ground, shining like little lanterns. For a heartbeat, fear surged through me, but then the shape stepped forward. It was a fox, slender and quick, its fur catching the beam like flame. The fox paused, tilted its head, and for a strange second it felt like we were both just two wanderers sharing the same patch of woods. Then, with a flick of its tail, it vanished into the shadows as silently as it had come. My heartbeat slowed, and I chuckled softly to myself. Out here, you don't always get the luxury of locks and doors, but sometimes the visitors are more curious than dangerous. I stoked the tiny embers of my fire, coaxing a little flame to keep the chill at bay, and stretched my legs out in front of me. The soreness was still there, but softened now, dulled by the meal, the quiet, and the night itself. For the first time all day, I felt not just tired, but content. And as I sat there with smoke curling upward into the star-filled sky, I thought about how the trail strips you down to your simplest needs: food, warmth, rest. Everything else, the weight of everyday worries, seems to slip off like an old coat left behind at the trailhead. Too big for the woods, responsibilities waiting back home, things I'd left unsaid, chores that seemed laughably far away yet somehow heavier than my pack. And just as I started to slide toward dreaming, a sound broke through it all, a sharp snap, like a stick cracking underfoot. My eyes flew open. I lay still, listening. The night seemed to hush with me, holding its breath. Then came another crack, closer this time, followed by a soft rustle in the leaves. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, ears straining. The dark pressed against me from all sides, thick and heavy. For a moment, I imagined the worst, a bear, nosing around like the one that once sniffed at my camp when I was a boy. I reached for the pot I'd left beside me, still faintly scented with broth, and cursed myself for not tucking it further from camp. The noise grew clearer, steady, deliberate. I fumbled for my flashlight again, thumb hovering over the switch, and then silence. The forest swallowed the sound, leaving nothing but the chirp of crickets once more. Minutes stretched out. Slowly, my shoulders dropped, and I eased back into my bag, though my ears stayed sharp, tuned for any hint of movement. Eventually, sleep came in broken pieces. I'd drift off for a few minutes, then wake again at the scurry of a mouse through the leaves or the distant yip of a coyote. My dreams were restless, filled with shadowy shapes slipping through the trees and half-heard voices carried on the wind. But even with the unease, there was something oddly comforting about it all. The woods were alive, reminding me I was never truly alone out there. Sometime in the darkest stretch before dawn, I opened my eyes to a sky scattered with more stars than I'd ever seen, sharp and glittering, almost close enough to touch. For a moment, all the fear and fatigue melted away, replaced by awe so pure it stilled me completely. The night, in all its wildness, had welcomed me in. The first light of dawn came gently, seeping through the branches like pale smoke. I woke to the sound of birdsong, a dozen voices overlapping, sweet and insistent. I tightened the straps on my pack. I thought again about that little meal, the instant noodles I'd eaten with such hunger and gratitude. Back home they would have been nothing, a late-night snack, cheap and forgettable. But out here, after 15 miles of sweat and strain, they'd been a banquet. They'd filled not just my stomach, but the hollow spaces carved by fatigue and solitude. That's the strange gift of the wilderness. It takes the simple things and polishes them into treasures. A pot of noodles becomes a king's feast. A fox in the night becomes a reminder you're part of a larger world, unseen yet alive all around you. Even discomfort, the blisters, the restless sleep, the creaks in your bones, becomes a teacher, sharpening your awareness of what truly matters. I hoisted my pack and started back down the trail, the sun climbing higher, warming the forest floor. Every step still ached, but it was an ache I welcome now, the kind that tells you you've lived fully in your own skin. The birds sang louder, the breeze carried the smell of pine and damp earth, and I smiled to myself. It wasn't the noodles, not really. It was the lesson they carried. That joy often hides in the smallest corners, waiting for us to be worn down enough to see it. Out here, stripped of the noise and clutter, you learn to notice. And once you've noticed, well, even the humblest meal can taste like triumph.